Hey guys, Jonathan and Suzy Lamb here. Just wanted to take a moment and first thank everyone for your
Yeah.
incredible support. Obviously, we've had something come to the surface that's been hidden to a very small select group of people, something that we've been walking with for several years now.
The down payment for the honeymoon was charged to the ministry credit card before the engagement was publicly announced. The date on the receipt is October 2022. Marcus Lamb died on November 30th, 2021. He was 64 years old. He died of COVID-19, a disease he had publicly discouraged his viewers from vaccinating against. And the moment he was gone, a clock started running. A clock that most of his viewers did not know existed, and that the people who did know about it were not in a hurry to disclose. 58 days after Marcus Lamb's death, on January 27, 2022, a man named Dr. Doug Weiss filed for divorce from his wife of more than 30 years. That detail, 58 days, is not incidental. It is the hinge on which everything that follows turns. Because the timeline of what happened next at Daystar television network, documented in expense reports, board meeting audio recordings, internal conversations, and the first-hand testimony of people who were in the room, tells a story that is considerably more complicated than the one that aired on the network's own broadcast. And it is a story about something more than one family's private grief or one man's new relationship. It is a story about how a ministry's money moved, who made the decisions, who objected, and what happened to the people who would not stay quiet. This video is based on documented primary sources, verified expense reports, board meeting audio recordings, public court records, Trinity Foundation flight records, and credentialed investigative journalism. All named parties have had documented opportunity to respond publicly. Nothing in this video constitutes a legal conclusion. Joni Lamb publicly denied Daystar paid for the honeymoon. Daystar stated all personal charges are reimbursed in full. The Roy's report reports no documentation of reimbursement was produced when requested. All sources are linked in the description. To understand the full weight of that 58 days, you need to know what Doug Weiss had said about his marriage just 3 years earlier. In 2019, Weiss appeared on Daystar, on the same network, on the same set, before the same cameras, alongside both Marcus and Joni Lamb, and described his wife Lisa publicly, on the record, in words that are now preserved in a clip that Daystar subsequently filed 3 separate copyright strikes against a journalist for posting. He said his wife had the purest heart he had ever met. He said she loves and serves with excellence. This is the description Doug Weiss offered of Lisa Weiss in 2019 to the founders of the network he was a regular guest on camera. By January 2022, 58 days after one of those founders was dead, Weiss had filed to divorce that woman. He did not announce his divorce publicly. He filed in January 2022. The divorce was granted in May 2022. He said nothing about it publicly until February 8, 2023, more than a year after the filing. In the intervening months, while still legally married to Lisa Weiss and then freshly divorced from her without public disclosure, he had been communicating with Joni Lamb daily, sending her long voice messages of prayer every single morning, telling her that God had told him not to hunt because God had the woman for him. He had made her heart flutter, according to the testimony of those closest to her, and no one outside a very small circle knew any of it was happening. Suzy Lamb, Jonathan Lamb's wife, Joni's daughter-in-law, was one of the first people Joni confided in. She told Suzy in June 2022, on a vacation, as a secret she asked her to keep. None of the other children knew. Only Jonathan and Suzy. And Suzy, in her direct testimony documented in the Laura Lynn Tyler Thompson interview that forms part of the source base for this video, described what she saw in real time as she watched the relationship develop. She said she could see right through it. She said the messages he was sending Joni, the declarations about God's will and the morning prayers, felt like a performance. She said she wanted to be happy for her mother-in-law, but she had a feeling something was off. She and Jonathan kept the secret. They were loyal. In August 2022, Joni Lamb met Doug Weiss in person for the first time. She invited him along on what had been planned as Jonathan and Suzy's belated anniversary trip to New York, their 11th anniversary, celebrated a year late because Marcus's death had disrupted their plans to mark their 10th. Suzy said she agreed immediately because Joni was her mother-in-law and she had no intention of leaving her alone during what would have been her 40th wedding anniversary trip with Marcus. She wanted Joni to have company, so Doug came along. Suzy said things became uncomfortable quickly, that there was nothing genuine about his behavior, that it felt wrong in ways she couldn't fully articulate, but that she and Jonathan gave the two of them their space because they were adults and it was not her place to intervene. Around this same period, according to the documented timeline confirmed in the recorded meetings obtained by the Roy's report, Weiss had reached out to a trusted spiritual advisor in Joni's life, a woman referred to in the interviews as Miss Denise, asking her to speak with his wife, Lisa. He told Miss Denise that he loved his wife and wanted to give the marriage every possible opportunity. Miss Denise met with both Doug and Lisa separately, spending several days with each. After spending time with Doug, she told Joni there was hope for the marriage. After meeting Lisa, she came away with the same conclusion. She told Joni that if reconciliation was truly possible, she would facilitate it. Joni Lamb told Suzy at a 4th of July lake house weekend that she was prepared to let Doug go if he was meant to be with his wife. Suzy said she believed her. She could see in that moment that Joni genuinely meant it, that she was willing to surrender the relationship if God directed otherwise. But Suzy also told her on the drive back to the city that she didn't think he was going back. She had a feeling. She was right. Then something critical happened. Jimmy Evans, pastor, founder of Exo Marriage, the man who had built a national reputation as one of American evangelical Christianity's foremost authorities on the subject of marriage, met with Doug Weiss. Based on the evidence documented in the recorded meetings, it appears this was a single conversation, hearing only Doug's account of his 30-year marriage. And after that single conversation, Evans determined that Doug Weiss had biblical grounds to divorce Lisa Weiss. Jonathan Lamb described this process in detail in the recorded board meeting, pressing Evans directly. You've only heard one side of this story. How can you, in good conscience, move forward with approving this marriage, knowing it will break apart two families, knowing that every sibling and their spouses are speaking against it, without at least talking to Lisa? Evans' answer, as Jonathan described it, and as the recordings corroborate, was that talking to Lisa would just slow everything down, that he had everything he needed from his conversation with Doug to make an accurate assessment, and that his determination was final. When Evans appeared on Joni's Table Talk program in March 2023 to publicly announce her engagement to Doug, he framed Lisa Weiss's version of 30 years of marriage in precisely the terms Doug had given him, that she had been abusive, that she had abandoned the marriage emotionally, that Doug had suffered in ways that gave him a biblical basis to leave. He declared on camera, on a nationally distributed Christian television network, that when someone chooses to abandon you and abuse you and will not stop, God gives us grace to leave so we can have a future. Lisa Weiss was not there to respond. She had not been interviewed. She had not been given a platform. She had simply been characterized in terms she was not present to contest to an audience of millions who had no way to evaluate the accuracy of what they were hearing. That Table Talk episode was subsequently removed from Daystar's YouTube channel and app. Lisa Weiss had asked that it be taken down because she had been portrayed unfairly and in a light she had not consented to. Daystar removed it. It remains accessible only via an internal Daystar link that the Roy's report obtained and published. And in a detail that speaks entirely for itself, Daystar filed 3 separate copyright strikes against a Christian journalist who had posted the 2019 clip of Doug Weiss praising Lisa's character on Daystar's own air. The clip where he called her the person with the purest heart he had ever met. That was the clip Daystar clearly did not want available for comparison with what Evans said in 2023. The Roy's report obtained and preserved it anyway. Miss Denise, for her part, had told Joni directly that she was concerned the issues in Doug's first marriage needed to be confronted before entering a new one. She had asked to be heard out on those concerns. Joni had initially agreed, but once Jimmy Evans gave his full approval, Joni told Miss Denise that she would not be interested in hearing her concerns any further. The voice she wanted to listen to was the one that said yes, not the one that said wait. That dynamic, seeking out the voice that confirms what you have already decided and cutting off the voices that might complicate it, is visible throughout the documented record of this period. It is visible in the board meeting recordings. It is visible in the expense reports. And it is visible in what happened in October 2022, when the first documented charge for a honeymoon reservation appeared on Joni Lamb's Daystar ministry credit card. Let that timeline sit with you for a moment. October 2022. The couple had met in person for the first time in August. Doug's divorce had been finalized since May, though not publicly disclosed, and would not be publicly acknowledged for another 4 months, in February 2023. The engagement would not be publicly announced until March 2023, 5 months away. Yet in October 2022, according to expense reports obtained by the Roy's report and confirmed by Jonathan Lamb, who, as Daystar's vice president at the time, had direct oversight responsibility over the ministry's expense reporting process, a charge of $36,780.32 appeared on Joni Lamb's Daystar ministry credit card, billed to Las Ventanas al Paraíso, a luxury resort in Los Cabos, Mexico. The note on the expense report, written by Joni's assistant at Joni's direction, according to Jonathan, read, Ms. Joni Lamb and Mr. Doug Weiss use U.S. Bank rebate points. The plan from the beginning, Jonathan confirmed in direct testimony, was to pay for the honeymoon using accumulated Daystar ministry credit card points. He consulted with CFO Arnold Torres, who checked with the head of accounting. The answer came back that the card had not accumulated sufficient points to cover the charges. As a result, the honeymoon was paid, in practice, with Daystar ministry funds. A second charge of $60,041.68 for the same resort appeared on a May 2023 expense report. The total documented honeymoon cost, per the itemized resort bill obtained by the Roy's report, was $103,818, meals, drinks, tips, and accommodation included. Joni and Doug were married in June 2023 and honeymooned in July at the resort, whose down payment had been charged to a ministry credit card 9 months before the engagement was publicly announced. Jonathan raised this at the August 2023 Daystar board meeting. He said plainly that it was not right for Daystar to pay for his mother's $100,000 honeymoon. The board at that point consisted of 3 people, Jonathan, Joni, and attorney Tom Callender. Callender's response, according to Jonathan's direct testimony, confirmed in subsequent recorded conversations that no one on those recordings contested, was to simply declare that Daystar would gift the honeymoon to Joni. He made that declaration. The conversation moved on. Joni Lamb later released a video in which she stated categorically, absolutely not. Not 1 penny of Daystar's money was used for our honeymoon. We paid for our honeymoon. Joni Lamb, public video statement, absolutely not. Not 1 penny of Daystar's money was used for our honeymoon. We paid for our honeymoon. The Roy's report asked Daystar for documentation showing when and how reimbursement was made. Daystar stated all personal charges on corporate cards are fully reimbursed. When the Roy's report immediately followed up requesting specific documentation, Daystar did not reply. The documentation has not been produced. Source, the Roy's report. The honeymoon was not the only financial question raised by this period. The Trinity Foundation, which monitors televangelism finances and flight records, documented that Daystar's private ministry jet made 24 round-trip flights between Fort Worth, Texas and Colorado Springs, Colorado, where Doug Weiss lives and runs his heart-to-heart counseling practice, between October 2022 and May 2024. The jet also made 13 round-trip flights between Fort Worth and Destin, Florida, during the same period. In September 2023, Joni and Doug purchased a beachfront condominium near Destin for $2.9 million. The total estimated cost of the jet travel to those 2 destinations, per the Trinity Foundation's calculation, was $769,220. Jonathan also noted in recordings obtained by the Roy's report that he had not agreed with Doug being added as host of Ministry Now, one of Daystar's flagship programs. He had not agreed with $5,500 of Rachel Lamb Brown's personal photography expenses being charged to Daystar. He said he had submitted to both of those decisions anyway, because submission was the standard that was constantly demanded of him. The recordings make clear that no one in those rooms disputed his account of these decisions. He said the only line he refused to cross was the word of God. It is also worth examining what was happening to the network's programming during this same window. In July 2022, Daystar abruptly canceled the long-running program End of the Age, produced by End Time Ministries, which had aired on the network since 2009. The CEO of End Time Ministries, Vince Stegall, told the Roy's report that his buyer's research showed the program was in the top 15 shows on Daystar every week, with DVR numbers running at 20 to 23% against a network average of 10. The cancellation in the middle of a broadcast year, and without stated cause, was, in Stegall's words, clearly not a viewership issue. In the same month, Daystar added Doug Weiss's Healing Time program to its schedule. Jonathan Lamb told the Roy's report that adding a program mid-year is as unusual as canceling one mid-year, that it simply does not happen under normal programming circumstances. At the center of all of this, blessing the marriage, rebuking the children who questioned it, urging Jonathan and Suzy to obey Joni as the voice of God at Daystar, was Jimmy Evans. A recording from July 2023, obtained by the Roy's report and made public, captured Evans in a meeting with Joni, Jonathan, and Suzy, telling them that Joni is the voice of God to you at Daystar, and that their role was to obey her. That recording went viral. It accumulated more than 23,000 comments, nearly all of them critical of Evans and of Joni Lamb. Evans subsequently announced in early 2025 that he was leaving XO Marriage, the marriage ministry he had founded in 1993, the ministry that had been his professional identity for over 3 decades, to pursue End Times prophecy content full-time. He characterized the departure as a long-planned personal transition. The Roy's report documented the timing and context. it followed the public backlash directly. Evans has not formally responded to the specific documented allegations regarding his approval of the Weiss divorce without speaking to Lisa. Suzy Lamb, in her direct testimony, described the night in October 2022 when Joni made her final decision. The siblings, Jonathan, Rachel, and Rebecca, had confronted their mother. After the confrontation, Suzy sat with Joni alone. She said she looked Joni directly in the eyes and asked her, "Are you willing, with your own children telling you that you have destroyed this man's marriage, to give up 40 years of faithfulness to God and your testimony, everything, for this one man?" Joni looked back at her and said, "Yes." Suzy said that in that moment she felt in her spirit that it was time to step back, that God gives free will, that she had said what she had to say. She started declining the wedding planning invitations, the coffee meetings, the attempts to bring her back into Joni's confidence. And that withdrawal, she said, was when the distancing began, the distancing that would lead, within months, to the surveillance, the NDA demand, the demotion of Jonathan's salary from $250,000 to $150,000, and eventually the termination of the man Marcus Lamb had intended to lead this network after his death. What emerges from all of this, when you lay the documented record end to end, is not simply a story about a widow who fell in love too quickly, or about a family in conflict, or about a pastor who gave bad marriage advice. It is a story about a structure, an institutional structure, in which accountability had no functional mechanism, in which the person at the top could use ministry resources for personal benefit and have a fellow board member declare it a gift, could cancel a ministry's program of 13 years to make room for her fiancé's show, could surround herself with advisors whose approval was conditional on agreement, and silence the internal voices that said, "Wait," without consequence. The same structure that had protected Marcus Lamb's 7-year affair, the same structure that had blacklisted Jeanette Hawkins, the same structure that would deploy private investigators against Marcus's own son. Jonathan Lamb, in all of the recordings, in all of the testimony, in every meeting where he raised his hand and said this is not right, comes across not as a rebel, not as someone motivated by power or money, but as a person trying to hold a line. He said he had submitted to things he disagreed with. He had objected to the honeymoon charges and been overruled. He had objected to the programming decisions and been ignored. He had objected to the NDA and been stripped of his position. He said the only place he would not bend was the word of God. For people watching from outside, donors, viewers, supporters who have given to this network because they believed in its mission, the question that the documented record poses is not a theological one. It is a practical one. When expense reports show $103,000 charged to a ministry credit card for a honeymoon, when the ministry's jet logs $769,000 in flights to a new spouse's hometown, when the board member, with the authority to authorize those charges, stands in a room and declares them a gift to the person who holds his position at her pleasure, and when the only internal voice that raised an objection is the one who is subsequently tracked, demoted, and fired, who is holding this ministry accountable? Joni Lamb died on May 7, 2026. She was 65 years old. In July 2026, Rachel Lamb Brown and Rebecca Lamb Weiss co-authored Daystar's monthly leadership newsletter as representatives of the network's leadership team. Jonathan Lamb has no role, no title, and no seat at the table his father built and his mother ran. The questions the record raises did not die with Joni Lamb. They belong to the institution that continues to operate, to broadcast, and to ask its viewers for their trust and their financial support. The documents are public, the recordings are archived, the expense reports are on file at the Roy's Report. The Trinity Foundation flight logs are published. The board meeting audio is time-stamped and available. If you want to evaluate any of this for yourself, and you should, every source used in this video is linked in the description below. Read them, listen to the recordings, draw your own conclusions from the primary evidence. Because the institutions that are most resistant to scrutiny are the ones that depend most on your willingness to take their word for it. Subscribe if you want to keep following this story. There is more to come. Until next time, stay rooted, stay real, stay in the Word. God bless.